first time.
Yeah, three-wheel drive, that's right. Some good things. I don't know if you all saw that Jessica Miranda in the 28th District won by 56 votes. And we did not know this previously, but 6 House seats were flipped. 6 House seats in Ohio were flipped. So, and Jessica Miranda is one of those. So that is a success. We didn't think that had happened, but it did happen. So, working to keep that going. Last week we had a lot of conversation about why people voted, why people vote the way they do. And we came up with a thing that was really maybe the rural versus the urban. And I had an experience last week. You all knew that I turned 70. And my daughter decided she was going to have a birthday party for me. So she invited my 3 Republican brothers and their Republican wives, and my Republican sister and her Republican husband. And then my one goofy sister-in-law says, let's all share who we admire. And my brother from Medford, Wisconsin, which is listed as one of the top 6 redneck places in the nation, gun store on every other corner, stands up and says, I so admire Donald Trump. He is everything I've ever hoped for. And Brett Kavanaugh is wonderful.
That's hard.
And I found out very quickly, these are all educated people, folks. These are not people that watch Fox News 24/7. These are college graduates, master's degrees, doctor's degrees. But they will sell their souls to the devil to overturn Roe v. Wade. That is their one issue. It doesn't make any difference about the economy. And I basically said to them, you really like the idea that these children have nothing to eat, that children have no place to live, that they're in shelters on the border, that they're being gassed. And I said, you guys are only about birth. You don't care about life. And, I walked away. And then my daughter said, anybody says one more thing and I'm kicking you out of here. So my daughter took care of that. But what was very interesting after that, this brother who just had such esteem for Donald Trump is the godfather of one of my nephews. He was a Northwestern grad, worked on the Beto campaign in Texas, went down there. And even though he wouldn't dare say this in front of the family, he came out as being gay. And my first comment to him was, do not tell your godfather. He will have you in conversion therapy next week. It's just, it's the strangest thing that somebody said to me, how did you get in that family? I mean, how did that happen? Well, I found it, I learned a lot. I learned a lot. I learned when to keep my mouth shut, and I learned how to, just not refute what they were saying, but saying, well, you don't care about children? I mean, you care about this, but you don't care about this and this and this and this? And they have no answer. They have no answer for that. So it was very enlightening. So we have another group of people out there that we have to be very conscious of, that will do anything to overturn Roe v. Wade, even though they don't realize all the consequences. This bill that's in Ohio, the heartbeat law, there's an amendment to that law, and I don't know if you've seen it. It's crazy. There's a lady that brought her infant twins in, and she's telling everybody, every woman who lives in Ohio has the responsibility of having children. Every woman. So in other words, she's put an amendment on this that all women must have the responsibility of bearing a child.
I bet the Catholic Church might have problems with their nuns.
Yeah. But it was just like, whoa. But it's in there now. Now, obviously, who knows what's going to happen with it. But it's some crazy stuff that are out there, and we just have to be aware this stuff's going on, because it really is crazy. And got a lot of people that, whoa. So, those are my reflections over the past week. And Rabbi Barr is going to be here in a couple minutes. He said he would be a little bit late. Yeah, Mike?
You said we picked up 4 seats.
Six.
How does that numbers, what are the numbers in the House?
Well, there's still a supermajority.
They still have a super.
Yeah, they still have a supermajority, but we're getting closer. And that was with gerrymandering, so there is some hope. There is some hope. All right, Alberta, you ready to take over?
I'm here,
Okay.
right here. I was very fortunate. I had Thanksgiving with a bunch of Democrats.
All right.
Actually, there are some Democrats from here, but they're not here today. But I was very fortunate, and I was able to speak freely and ask and just enjoy the moment. It was very nice for me. Thank you, thank you. I didn't have to confront family like my brother did down in Tennessee, where he came into his redneck Tennessee cousins. On the other hand, the guy that I have been sitting next to for 24 years in the Sycamore Band was walking his horn player girlfriend across the street in Pigeon Forge, and a car hit them, and I have family that have now put him up. So she's going to be in the hospital for a long time, but I have family that's looking out for him in Pigeon Forge. Yay! So thank you for family, even if they're Republican.
They're not all bad.
No, they're not all bad. Their hearts are in the right places on some deals. I have a couple of announcements. One of them came from Gwen McFarland today. You know that Ms. Pillage got a wonderful job in Washington, D.C., and we're very happy for her. She's excited, and it's really nice for her. But Gwen McFarland's going to pick up the pieces, and she's decided she's going to make money for the Democratic Party. Yay! And she spoke to me this morning, and she has David Pepper coming tonight to the letter carriers meeting hall in Northside at 6 p.m. So if you're interested in seeing David Pepper and putting yourself in line to just be enthusiastic about David Pepper and him taking the Democratic Party even further. Because in fact, we've done relatively well here in Ohio compared to where we were. So if you want to go to the letter carriers hall in Northside at 6 p.m. tonight with David Pepper. And I said for her to have him sign up for January. And we'll see, we'll hope that happens. Okay, other announcements. Yes, Marlene. Marlene or Marlena?
Marlena.
Marlena.
Hello again, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm Marlena Brookfield, but I think at this point we're all friends here. Running for Cincinnati Public School Board in 2019. Tonight will be my official first stumping speech. We're going to go down to Richard Asmus's Tuesday work group and meet some more folks, and I'll see you there. An update regarding this campaign. If you didn't know, last week Hamilton County Republicans tweeted that they're setting their sights on this school board race. And I happen to know that now there is a second person that has filed for candidacy, and she is a Republican. So we're gonna work extra hard, because I think we all know by now that the Republican agenda for public education is not is to get rid of it. It's to privatize, to reinforce the classism and racism that is inherent in the system right now. So I would ask that we keep on the alert, and I am always thankful for moral support. So please, if you haven't signed my ballot petition already, come see me. And if you have any questions about how you can help uplift the cause of public education, also see me.
You need financial support. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, for financial support.
Because we would like to be able to publish literature so that we can give out to more people. We do unfortunately need to ask for money. So if you have a few extra bucks that you want to throw my way, I would appreciate it. But yes, that was pretty much what I wanted to convey today. Sorry, it's been a long day. It's going to be a longer day, and it's cold. So my brain's a little tired.
Go for it. Why don't you hold that? Give that to the next person.
The regular Wednesday night Span Ohio meeting has been moved to 6:30 tonight because of conflict. 6:30 tonight, Span Ohio.
There you go.
At the First Unitarian Church, on Reading Road.
The third meeting tonight, my goodness, they're gonna talk about conquering by division here. My goodness. Did I see, Dr. Weaver, did I see you looking for the mic?
No.
Oh. Okay, who else had an announcement? Tanya Cooper, who just came in, has signed up for the next two meetings for naturalizations. And she's going to be representing us as well as the League of Women Voters for registering voters for the rest of the year. So she's got the two meetings in December. I'm really proud of you. That's very nice. She's actually signed up on the real place. Other announcements? Come on, we need some more announcements because Rabbi isn't here yet. Oh, the newsletter. Yeah, because all you've got is meetings for tonight, right? There you go. Okay, Bennett can make something up. Here we go.
Actually, I've been thinking about the election a while ago, and I haven't heard anybody describe it quite as positively as I think it was. If you look at all over the country, we might have a senator from Mississippi later today. I've read that that the Democrats took 350 state legislative seats around the country, 8 governors. And so I think the tide is changing, and I think we ought to be encouraged, not discouraged. Ohio's a mixed bag, clearly. We did okay in Hamilton County. Sherrod got in. The semi-sleeping DeWine got to be governor, which I'm disappointed on, but we can't win them all. Georgia and Florida were really close races for some senators and governor. And so I think the tide is changing. If you look around, I think things are changing in the right direction. And I don't think we ought to be discouraged. I think we ought to be encouraged and keep fighting, keep pushing.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Very interesting thing that was said last Tuesday night at the Richard Asmus's group by one of the field reps that was working on the campaign. She said, we were successful in other places around the country because of the huge amount of money that was thrown into Ohio in the AFTAB and the check race. So much money was put into that there was not money to go into other places. So we should be partially responsible for the success of those races too. But I never thought about that, but that's true, because I mean, they had a lot of money. They were very much afraid of that race. Here's Rabbi Barr. Hallelujah.
Yes.
We'll give him a second to get ready to go.
While he's getting ready, I wonder if anybody would like to take a minute or two and try to clarify, if possible, what's going on with City Council, the Gang of Five, the court indictments, that whole thing. Does anybody have a good handle on that?
There are no indictments.
Well, I mean, there's grand jury subpoenas is what I'm talking about. You want to pick a crack at that?
I don't know anything about it. I mean, I just know they talk to each other, that's all I know.
I think it's
Wait a minute.
It's Miller, the same guy that went after AFTAB.
it's overblown. That's all I got to say.
Oh.
I don't think it's a real issue.
Well, it's
It's getting a lot of press because the press likes to talk conflict. That's my personal opinion, I don't know, I might be wrong.
Yeah,
That they didn't share information with the public, is that one of the issues?
yeah, that's the charge that's being leveled, is that they broke a law that says if the majority or more of council has interactions about council business and it isn't done publicly, that's a violation of the law, but I suspect that's a bit of a red herring.
You know, in this era that we live in, almost any politician can get in trouble for talking about policy and, you know, projections for the future with other politicians behind closed doors. Or in public, they have to go behind closed doors to get anything done. If everything is done in the public eye, and I know it's a fine line, but I have a problem with the idea that they can't talk to each other without it becoming a scandal. You know, yeah, the public needs to know, but also nothing gets done if the public gets in the middle of every single discussion.
Change the law.
If you're looking, I never allowed them. If you're looking for an announcement, there is a proposed state statute that could also be proposed in Ohio, given that issue 1 did not pass. It talks about the collateral consequences of conviction. And at the state level, they'd be obligated to hand each person convicted a sheet detailing what import their conviction has upon their future. Eligibility for employment, benefits, etc. State and federal consequences.
Rabbi Barr likes some Chinese food. No, okay.
It's not Christmas yet.
Not Christmas yet, we just...
You know, Jews have an unusual relationship with Chinese food and Christmas and other holidays. Without further ado, Rabbi Barr from Beth Adom.
Good afternoon. Good to see you. Way back there, way back there. In the way back, in the way back. Thanks for having me. I've been here for a bit. It's good to see you all. Let me just, my charge is to talk about sort of now that the election's over. And I believe I was invited, I've given at least 1 or 2 talks now about my thoughts about how we begin to think about the future. And I gave a talk to one of the working groups in Northside, and I guess somebody had heard about it and asked me to come here. So let me just give you a little bit of context about who I am and something. Some of you know me, know my experience, but I think it'll be a little bit helpful because my view probably is a bit different than others. So many of you know that I was running for Ohio 1, that's what for Ann, prior to AFTAB's entering the race. So my preparation for that was over a year's worth of work. A lot of people don't know the backstory of how I got in. I've always had good friends in DC who I've had a long relationship with and has always had a political conversation with. So back actually in December of 16, you want to be closer? Can you not hear? If you can't hear, raise your hand. Okay, okay, I'll be closer. Okay, just let me know. So I started in December of 16 talking to people about the race. That was about more than quite a while ago. And we began to explore it and begin to think about it. In March, I went to DC of that year and had extensive conversations again with people about what they thought about the race. And in meeting with people in Congress, one of the things that came up was I was an unusual candidate. I'm a rabbi. I've been a rabbi for almost 40 years. I look at the world through that lens. I look at the world through a values and philosophic lens. And what that would mean and how I would bring that to Congress. That carried through until I stepped out of the race. And then the question became afterwards, what did I learn from it? What did I learn from the experience of running? What did I learn from the experience of talking to different folks in the political world? What did I learn from hearing what they were saying about what they thought the future was? So some of the things I can't attribute to people because they were off-the-record private conversations, but they did inform what I'm thinking and what I'm about to say. So after the election, I spent a lot of time talking to people after I stepped out. And I started writing an op-ed piece that we shopped around, but unfortunately couldn't be published. And no one was going to pick it up. It was an op-ed piece in which I made a couple observations that I want to share with you, and then we'll sort of move to the next step. One, the first thing that happened, one of the first earliest meetings I had as a political consultant went, "Oh, Rabbi, you're only going to have a vanity campaign." That was the first comment he made. He and I did not get along very well after that. And that was the highlight of the conversation, which was his first comment, because he went, "Oh, you just want to talk about values and ideas." As if somehow values and ideas in DC were not of any value. And that if you did that, you couldn't win. I would argue that that was part of the problem. What I found oftentimes in a lot of conversations, as I was running and as the conversation kept on getting going, is people wanted a lot of policy statements, but there was no connective tissue. There was nothing that held the values together. It was as if it was a human being with lots of separate organs, but there was no tissue that held all the organs together to make it a human body. In fact, one of the conversations I had, I was sitting with a member of Congress, and we were talking about, I don't know how many people remember the better deal. How many people remember when the Democrats came out? Anyone even remember that? That's how bad it was. That you don't even know it, and I mentioned it to a congressman. He said, "If you ever say that again, I won't talk to you." That's the problem. There was no overarching vision, and there was no connective tissue. What I'm beginning to present to people, and I'm doing this in various forms here and in other forums, is that we need to move from a couple issues. One, we need to move from policies to having a value statement about what we believe and how policies then come out of those values. We've turned it around. We're talking about a set of policies, and then we try to figure out what value they represent. It needs to be the other way around. Those values should be connected to an overarching theme so that they come out naturally, that the language is similar and is amplified by all the groups that are working in the same area. So there are American values that we should be talking about. There are people who are now writing in this area, independent of me, about what those values are. What does it mean to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Those are American values. What does it mean what are the policies that would emanate from a value statement like that? What emanates from a value statement that we the people, which is the preamble of the Constitution of the United States. A lot of people read the preamble as somehow, oh, that's a toss-away, that's a throwaway. That was the framing for the documents that came later. What did they mean by that? And frankly, the other issue is obviously Constitution and old, what I would call sacred American documents need to continue to grow. And we would look at them and say, what do the values that are embedded in them mean? How do we talk about those values? And out of those values, what policies then emanate? Because we're rather than going from policy to value to policy. The other thing I've been talking about a lot is we need to have a long-term vision. We have a really incredibly short-term vision. People have already said to me, well, are you considering running again? I'm not interested in talking about that conversation, but somebody in DC said, if you are, you gotta get ready in May already if you're gonna start running again for 2020. We're spending all of our time running, going from cycle to cycle without an overarching plan. It is haphazard. We're wasting a lot of energy and a lot of time. And at the end of the day, sometimes the baton has to be passed. You know what's good about a racer? When they're running, when the baton is passed, they actually know where they're going. They're going in this big loop because they all know the game. and they have a set of principles and a set of values, and you pass it off. Right now, we don't have that because we don't have a vision of where we're going. Whoever gets the baton next is going to start creating a whole new set of policies and principles. We need a vision, and it needs to be longer. The Republicans have done a far better job having a long-term strategy of where they wanted to go, and they were patient. Back when I started as a rabbi, the first thing I learned was the person who sits at the meeting the longest wins. If you walk out in the middle of the meeting, if you walk out 12 minutes before it's over, or 2 minutes before it's over, what you said doesn't matter, because it's going to be the last person sitting there who's going to get the work done. And a lot of times what's happened is we've walked out too soon. This is a long-term process. It's years, if not decades. The Republicans had a 30-year plan, and they have the Supreme Court. It took 30 years, because they understand that a government isn't of this moment, it is for this moment and to the future, and they made a plan. We don't have a plan of where we're going or what we want to achieve. And we need to move away from it. And it's frustrating because when you live, if you're willing to accept that notion, you're willing to accept the fact that for a period of time, you're going to be living in a world you don't like. But you accept that, saying, here's the vision of where I want to go. And a vision, if it is clear, everyone can see it. Whether or not one likes it or not, Make America Great Again was a vision statement that people imagined what he was talking about. Whether they were correct or not, it was a strong vision statement. We need to have a strong vision statement. We need to be willing to be patient, have a plan of where we're going to go, and it needs to transcend any one politician. The thing that I noticed, and I saw it even in DC when we were talking about the presidential election, people were saying, well, we hope we're going to get a good person to run. Not does the person, not did the person have a value statement, not does the person have a message. Are they going to be charismatic? And what's the question that every politician gets asked when you're beginning to run? Question I got, I met with 14 members of Congress. It was within the first 2 questions. What's the question? Can you raise money? Not, do you have anything to say? Not, are you moral? Not, do you have a vision? Not, do you have principles? But can you raise money? If that's what it's going to, if that's the first question or second question we're going to ask, not does the person have substance, not does the person have gravitas, not does the person have an ability to articulate a vision and lead people along, we're going to continue to bump into walls. So it's vision, values, and long-term ability to be in the process. It also recognizes that we have to start looking at every level of government, and I think we've lost that as well. I think we get so fixated on the big ones, we forget about all the little ones that are shaping the policies and programs that are part of the fiber of America. So if we're going to talk about values, we should make sure we have people on school boards articulating American values so the kids that we're teaching, this is now, think about my experience. I run a religious school. Actually, I have someone who runs it for me. We were sitting and talking. We now have children in religious school who are going to be living into the 22nd century. 22nd century. Who do we want on school boards? And what do we want them teaching those children so that America in the 22nd century is the America we envision it to be? We need to think about that now because the people on the school boards are going to start making those decisions. We just had a president, we have a president, who got a 1,600-page report, and I just have a sense, he got it on Friday, I just don't imagine he read it over the weekend, but on Monday he said, I don't believe it. Right? It was the climate change. What are we teaching our kids about science? What are we teaching our kids about facts? How are we helping them to distinguish between fake news and real news as they're getting they have more access to more information than any of us can realize. So we need to begin looking at every facet of how we govern ourselves as a people and say, do we have folks in each one of those places that is helping to create the vision and values that we want. Sometimes it's going to be really long-term, looking at kids who are going to be in the 22nd century. Those kids are going to be, they're going to live that long, but they're going to start voting much sooner than that. Who's working on that level? We have to look at the state level and state policies as well. I don't think we focused enough on that. When I was at meetings, it was always about congressional races, probably because I was there for that. But while we were talking about it, the whole issue of gerrymandering, we didn't get the governorship, we didn't get the auditorship, we didn't get the Secretary of State. Those were three key positions in the gerrymandering and the redistricting lines. I have to say, when I went back and I started looking at the documents I received, that was not a big talking point. That was shaping the next 10 years. Why weren't we talking about 10 years versus 2 years? It's going to be refocusing and reframing with the way we do it. The thing that makes me different is because I have lived in the world of religion so long, the word 2 years is meaningless. It is a short span of time in history that spans thousands of years or hundreds of years in the government. We need to be a bit more patient and begin to have a plan that we're moving to. It will be frustrating, but rather than chasing our tails quickly, we need to do that working at each of the levels. That is my pitch at this point as I'm going out and speaking. It will take groups like this sitting around and having serious conversations about what are the values that brought you here. It's not just that we have to move beyond team sports. This is not just blue team and red team anymore. What is the value of America that you wanted to see? Can you name 5 American values that are core principles for you that you want to hear articulated every time someone speaks? What are those principles? What are those values? And out of those values and principles, what emanates? It changes the conversation. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by why it changes the conversation. When I was running, I was meeting with lots of folks, obviously. And as a function of being a rabbi, I certainly know people on both sides of the aisle. And I have good friends and supporters who supported me as a religious leader. And I was sitting with somebody and it became, Obamacare versus Trump care. That was the conversation. And I said, that doesn't interest me at all. First just looked at me. What do you mean? I said, that's a boring conversation. I said to him, I have one question for you. Do you think people in America should be allowed to die on the streets of our streets for lack of health care? And he said, of course not. I said, great, now we're just negotiating money. And all of a sudden the conversation changed because it was no longer about my team versus his team. It was about, did we have a shared American value, and how do we, now that we agreed on the value, how do we achieve that value? Now, we would probably have disagreed on the taxation of it, but we weren't going to disagree on the principles. And I probably moved further in that quick conversation than we would have if we had argued Trump care for Obamacare, because we both would have walked away going, oh, isn't he a jerk? We both would have said it. He would have called me a jerk, and I would have called him a jerk. But we each found a value, and I think we need to begin to articulate those values. If we really believe in America's we the people, a lot of things emanate from that. The idea of every citizen having the right to vote. How do we ensure that? And how do we talk about that? How do we have a language that's strong enough and powerful enough where when we hear it, it makes sense. It resonates with other people, and they go, yeah, that's an American value that I hold and that I want to express. That's what I'm hoping to do. So a group like this, while it's important to have information, you're going to be working short-term, day-to-day, it needs also to begin to move from that day-to-day to a long-term value vision. What are your visions? What do you want to see for America? And it's not going to happen in the next election. It's not going to happen in the next election. Even if we win the presidency, we still have a Supreme Court, and we have federal judges who have a big impact on our lives, bigger oftentimes than we realize. And we have a state government that has massive impact on our lives. So we need to begin to move that. So this group needs to sit, I believe, and spend some time talking about what are those values that you hold, why do you hold them, and what do you see emanating out of them as a result. Then you need to begin to look at who can articulate that. That becomes who the politicians are. People who are, there are good candidates, people who are better candidates, and there are people who are better politicians. They're not the same job. Unfortunately, we've conjoined that in America. Can you raise money is the first question, not do you have anything to say. We've conjoined those two things. That's another problem. And I think as a party, we need to think about what is that going to look like. How are we going to find candidates that give voice to what we believe, who are consistent in that, who we support, and this is going to be a challenge too at times. And I saw it right away. So I had one of my consultants that works in D.C. And continues to work in D.C. with the Democratic Party. And one of the conversations we had very quickly was, sometimes don't say anything that's too specific, because you might turn somebody off. There's a point at which we're going to have a world in which we don't agree on everything all the time. And if we're not adult enough to do that, then we don't deserve to be in leadership roles. I told people when I was out running that I was going to disappoint you. There is no way that you're doing a serious job on a regular basis with lots of complexities that somebody's not going to vote in a way that you will not disagree with. It's impossible. And if we have any expectation that every time they do that, we're always going to go cheer, 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 Bob did the right thing, we're being childish and foolish. What we need to do is say, this is the person we respect, we know their core values, we know what they represent, and we know that every time they go into the room, they're going to do the best job they can, and sometimes they're going to come out and we're going to be proud of them, and sometimes we're going to be pissed at them. But we're still going to recognize the fact that they did the job that we asked them to do, bringing the values we want. And that's difficult, because that's like having long-term vision. Sometimes you give up a little bit for something that's purposeful and meaningful. It's like doing exercises. We all want to, I have wanted to run the Boston Marathon since I was in graduate school. The only problem is I never wanted to practice. You know what? You can't run the Boston Marathon if you don't train. You got to put in the time. And this is going to be the same thing we're going to be doing with politicians. The hard work is having a vision and also understanding differences amongst us. And I think that will be a challenge when we find politicians who we may not fully agree with on a regular basis, how we're going to cope with that. I think oftentimes, and I experienced it in some conversations, not just really across America, one of the things that running afforded me was talking to candidates around the country. And candidates who were frustrated that people were oftentimes only talking about one candidate. That it was like, here's the one that's going to do it. Here's the person who's going to get us over the line. And they forgot that there were multiple candidates running. We need to look at the full table and look at it as a chessboard, as a complex series of moves with lots of people involved. And I know for a fact there were people who won that no one was expecting to win. People were paying attention to them. We were paying attention to certain races and we weren't paying attention to others. And frankly, there were candidates out there who were busting their humps, who were really very frustrated that they weren't getting the attention from the party that they felt they deserved. They felt they got their marks, and they weren't getting it. We need to move beyond sort of the shiny brass ring. We need to move away from a quick turnaround. We need to turn to a long-term game, a long-term strategy based upon visions and based upon values. So what I want to do is stop. I said we have question and answers. This is not I don't have charts yet. Somebody said, do I need a PowerPoint? No, I don't, because I'm still working through this. And when people have been asking me to speak, I've been saying, I'm working through this. I'm talking to people. One of the reasons I'm engaging in these conversations is I want to hear what people have to say. Because I think we have to move from just frontal conversations to really going back to a series of deep conversations, regrouping with a set of principles in mind that we're working towards. So I'm curious before you speak before you ask your question, say who you are, tell me 3 American values that you think should be spoken about every time. Thanks. Go ahead, Bill.
No, I'm doing this.
Thank you. Good talk. My name is Bennett Cooper. I'll go for your reference to the preamble. It's got about 5 in there that I buy. I think we ought to talk about those all the time. The preamble is the rationale for the existence of government, as I read it. Makes sense. Good reference. I'd like to go from your values in there to maybe some strategies. Maybe take a look at history and see what has worked in the past. I kind of like FDR in the New Deal. You didn't mention the New Deal, you mentioned...
The better deal, the better.
You're right. You said, by whose standards is that, right? But the New Deal actually created a middle class that was the largest class in the country for the first time in the existence of the human species. I think that's a good example of strategies and coalitions that actually work. And so that's kind of what I look at. I think we need to look at what's going on today. I think we need to look at the values, as you say, and I think we need to study some history to do some, find some strategies.
I agree with you. What value do you think that underpins the New Deal?
You know, I think he was looking at economic security. I mean, I think that was the major piece, and I think that's the piece that separates the 1% from the 99%, which makes us the biggest majority you could have. I mean, and I think that's in my head, that's what we got to focus on, economic stuff, because as long as we're focusing on a lot of other issues, we're breaking up the 99% of the smaller groups.
Okay.
Consider that a value? Consider that a value?
Well, I think the 99 versus the 1%. Well, I think equality is the value. I think equality is a value that we're in this together. Anyone thinks that, a couple things that I know as a rabbi, none of us gets out of this alive. And unless you got a guarantee that I didn't get, and I want to talk to you about that. I did not get like a Maytag repairman going to make sure I ran for 87 years or anything like that. And the second thing is we are in this together. And we need to start talking about that more. The fact is, as a society, I mean, Kennedy said it, a rising tide lifts all boats. It was inspirational. We saw a connection with each other. I think the issue of what you're talking about is equality and connectivity. We are in this together, and we need to remind people that the fact is global climate change doesn't skip over the 1%'s houses. It doesn't go, oh wow, you're like really rich. It's going to be a cool day today. Or those fires in California, which were fueled by climate change, didn't go, oh, this is a really rich neighborhood, other than those people could hire private firefighters, which some of them did, which really sort of goes, I think, against American values. We moved away from that. We said we are all responsible for each other. If your house is on fire, it's my responsibility as a citizen to help. Not that I come over and dump water on it, but I pay for the water, right? Because we all pay for water that runs through the hydrants. And we pay for a firefighting system, people in place to do that, to protect all of us. We're in this together. We need to go back to some language about sort of a sense of togetherness, equality, and that we have a responsibility to each other as citizens to ensure our safety, life, and our liberty.
Yeah, I want to go back to the FDR because the crucial factor was the Wagner Act, which recognized that under capitalism, big money has kinds of power that are radically different from the vast majority of people. The Wagner Act empowered workers to have really strong potential organizations. And that's the single factor, I think, that most created the middle class, which has been systematically destroyed in the last 20, 30 years.
So I'm going to ask you, so this is the
value of participation and power.
Okay, because I think what happens is we are so, and Peter, I think it's a historical and important point, but we need to move from which policy is going to get us there to where do we want to get. We need to be able to articulate a vision, because when we can get people to see the vision, when I said to this guy, do you want people to die in the streets of America? And he said no. We had a common starting place. When I asked people, when I was out talking to people, And I said, do you want your grandchildren to have clean water to drink? I didn't hear anyone say no. I said, so how are we going to ensure that? Because if you've studied science, we have a closed water system in the world we live in. All the water we have is all the water we have. If we screw it up, it's gone. It's not gonna, it doesn't magically come out of the faucet. So once you can get people to think about what those values are, and then we move to the policies, because I promise you there are going to be policies that are going to be changing very rapidly. We are on the precipice of such radical change. Our children and grandchildren are going to live in a world that we do not understand. One of the reasons GM in likelihood closed its plants, it's already looking at a changing market of kinds of cars that are being sold. Gas cars are becoming less and less, certainly in other countries, electric cars are becoming more popular, and autonomous cars are becoming more popular. Probably before Congress figures out the rules for Uber, which are still not clear, we will have an autonomous driving system. And what we need to do is, what are the rules that are going to dominate that? What's going to happen when we're living in a world where cars are self-driving, where there's a whole class of people who don't have jobs as a function of that? I'm a Detroiter. I had friends of mine who were great tool and die makers. They had a great life. But their life doesn't exist the same way anymore. The car industry is changing. So we need to move away from a specific policy to what are the principles in the world that is going to be the world that is different.
I think you missed the principle that I was articulating, is that capitalism is fundamentally against human equality and fairness. And it's out of a recognition of that reality that we have to think about policies which can rein in the power of capital.
Socialist.
Hi, well, I thank you for coming today, and I think it's a great, difficult step to get from our current constitution to what you had in mind. But in picking up on FDR and affirmative values, well, Justice Kennedy was talking about the FDR 4 freedoms and how difficult it is for negative prohibitions in the Constitution to be transcended by affirmative ones, and how do we guarantee a right to water and 3 hots and a cot and food? I mean, if that's the value we would have to give for children to have a sense of purpose and education and life in Cincinnati, I mean, maybe they see it in other cities and not in Cincinnati so readily, that there is an affirmative value. And it is in the UN Charter, isn't it? Is Cincinnati in violation of a treaty that the United States is a signatory to?
I'll bring this over here. I'm just going to try and give you at least one value.
You at least take the assignment seriously.
Yeah. No homework, but and I would say a critical, maybe the critical American value in my mind is the principle of a separation of government and religion. And as a rabbi, running to be part of government and a representative of religion to some extent, or to a large extent, talk about that.
Thanks. I knew I'd like you, Bill, for a reason. That's the reason you have to. So, I know Bill a long time, so I can joke. Okay. The first thing I did, because I have worked in the world of separation of church and state for as long as I've been a rabbi, that is a core principle of mine. I called 2 different attorneys, one a private attorney and one a representative of the ACLU, and sat down and had a conversation about what would it mean to be a rabbi running for Congress. Only the 3rd rabbi in the history of America, only the first pulpit rabbi. There are other members of Congress. Emanuel Cleaver is a minister. He and I spoke. There are people who have served in Congress of other denominations. They used to be priests, they're no longer priests. And I had this question: what would it mean to do that? So the very first thing on a sort of personal level was to divide my life, which was a real pain in the rear end, frankly. I wound up having to, as simply as running out and having another computer that was fully and all mine, that had nothing to do with the congregation, and it was a PC, and I used Macs, and it was driving me crazy. So I have a Surface, if anyone wants to buy a Surface. So I bought a Surface, and we went through that. And it was like kosher, it was milk and meat. Yeah, they never had, milk and inflation is the Yiddish terms for that. And there was a great, in my congregation, I literally never spoke about running until after I stepped out. So we made a really clear divide. That was the first thing on a sort of just practical, personal level of how you do it. The second question, though, is my goal was never to bring my particular religious perspective in government. It was to maintain separation of church and state. I think it was to use how I understood the world, understand the sense of documents, and I would brought the same kind of principles that I bring to religion to government. What are the founding documents? What do those principles mean? If they have any meaning, our country was incredibly radical. The notion of we the people was a radical notion that changed the way the world government was functioning. If you want to have an interesting experience, if you ever have the opportunity, Windsor Castle has a chapel, and it's a Queen's chapel, and buried in the center of the Queen's chapel is Henry VIII and Jane Seymour. If you ever had a chance to go there, and I'm been fortunate, my wife teaches overseas a lot, we went there for services one night. And you saw the intertwining of the Anglican Church with government in a very clear liturgical way. It was amazing to experience it. I think as Americans, we forgot what it meant to break away from a monarchy that saw itself empowered by God. We the people was a radical notion empowering every human being for him or herself to make decisions about the nature of how they want to live their lives. That no person's life is owned by anybody else. That's what was embedded in we the people. I know there was slavery, but for their time, they were incredibly radical at that moment, and what they did is they created a value set that we've been able to push against and push against and push against and keep on using to move us to a place where slavery was abolished. We saw it as wrong, where women were empowered because women didn't have power. We kept on pushing and changing the notion of it because they had a vision of what it meant to be a person that was different than what it meant. And language changes over time. And those are the kinds of things that I wanted to bring that sense of analysis, because I've looked at religion for the last 40 years of my life and how it evolved. The other thing, too, that I thought was very interesting, for me, this was an experience that I had. I was sitting with a member of Congress, so part of my vetting process, is part of it being a rabbi, part of it having friends in D.C., they wanted me to meet with a lot of members of Congress to see if they thought I would be okay. That's weird. It was sort of strange because having been a rabbi for 40 years, I was older than most of the people I was talking to, and they weren't quite used to that. Maybe I'll tell you one quick funny story, and then I'll get back to the story. So my wife and I were meeting with a member of Congress, a female member of Congress, I'm not going to mention who it was, and she looked at my wife. And my wife has been a professor for 20-some-odd years. She's worked around the city in a variety of jobs and been married to me for our 40th wedding anniversary. Next is in March. So she looks at my wife and she says, Mrs. Barr, it's actually Dr. Barr, but she didn't correct me. She said, Mrs. Barr, are you prepared to be under scrutiny? Are you prepared for people to look at you and wonder about your life? Are you prepared for your husband to sit on the dais and you sitting at a table? And my wife leaned in and said, I've been married to this guy for 40 years. What do you think a rabbi's life is like? And this congressman went, oh, that was a dumb question, wasn't it? Because they didn't understand who they were talking to. They didn't understand the life that we came out of. So there was an interesting, so at one point I was sitting with a member of Congress who I talked to once or twice before, and I said to him, I said, frankly, I'm not a policy wonk. It's not. There are things that I know about, but I'm not a policy wonk. That's not my expertise. I don't know that I'll ever get to the place, given my age and the amount of time I might have in Congress. I'm not sure that I'm the right person. And he looked at me and he said, Rabbi, we got policy people everywhere you look. He said, I want you to be in Congress because you represent a sense of values. I want you to stand up on Congress to bring us to where we need to be as a value-driven nation based upon American values. That's what we need articulated. To me, there's a strength in being able to do that is American values, not religious values. Because I think we have allowed religion to intertwine, and we continue to do that. And the thing I know about religion is we give religion a pass, and we give religious people a pass. Funny, as a rabbi, I speak at all kinds of places that as a regular person, I don't get to speak. I get to open city council, I get to close city council. I get to sit and talk on Fountain Square. Members of, clergy go to Congress and get to give talks. Members of Congress get talk to clergy on a regular basis. I don't know how many people know there's a whole ministry in DC trying to get members of Congress to see the world through a very, and I'm using the word Christian in a very narrow way, I'm a fundamentalist Christian way. And they're trying to do that because they want them to read our documents, I'm talking about the American documents, through a different lens. Our founders were deists. They did not believe in an interventionist deity. They believed in a God that created the world, wound it up, and walked away. All the values are our values. That's what I was going to be able to talk about. And when they take us to the Bible Museum, this is one of my great hopes. There is a museum of the Bible now right off of the mall. Does everyone know that? So I went there. It's incredibly well done, and I'm still not quite sure I understand all the tricks that are going on there. But I'm pretty good at this stuff. But I promise you, what they're going to do, they will take members of Congress to this Bible Museum and explain to them, because it's already pre-set up because of the different folks that are, there's a picture of Martin Luther King, and there's a picture of Abraham Joshua Heschel, who's a very famous rabbi, and all these people quoting the Bible. I promise you, they're going to walk through young members of Congress or older members of Congress, but people who don't know religion well say, see, this is what this is all about. This is America. It's the Bible. And I was going to get to walk through as somebody who reads Hebrew and reads the text in the original and get to say, not quite what they're saying to you. That would have, to me, would have been the best. You would have liked to have been there for that one. So it is a problem. So separation of church and state, and it's affecting, so separation of church and state is affecting education. It's affecting science, right? Because ultimately religion and science, in the way, Creation Museum, right, which is are in opposition, so it affects American education. It's affecting healthcare policy, women's rights and choice, access to healthcare. It's affecting gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual rights. Those are being affected. So the trickle down is quite enormous, and it also is fundamentally the way that authority is used. So you see it right now in America. People use authority as their backstop. So, and Trump articulates it. He says, nothing is true. Don't believe what's right before your eyes. Religion oftentimes does that, frankly. Religion oftentimes tells you not to see what the text says. Most of us don't read the text as it was written. We read the text as we were told to read it. And we need to get people to have critical thinking skills again, where they're questioning and where disobedience isn't a punishment or a sin. Okay. There's a couple questions. I'm sorry. I can go on. I'm a rabbi.
I just wanted to add, theism is all about authority.
Mm-hmm.
And authority and theism is all about why we have the president we have and the way people respond to him.
Yeah, I was so excited to hear you were here because I've heard you at Ali before. And most of all the time, the funny stories you told about visiting the Creation Museum, all that was I want to share a couple of the values I wrote down and you said and see what you think of them. And then I'd like to hear some more of your questions to ask, like, do you want your grandkids to have clean water? That would be really interesting. But I said share, love, tolerance, be kind, open your heart to all. Now, is that catching what you're talking about? Am I on the right page there? In terms of values?
I think they're good values. For America, I think they're a little bit, I think they need to be more, not sure the word I'm looking for. I like those. I think I don't know that we have to, so like be kind is an interesting
Their
one.
actions instead of values.
Right, their actions instead of values. What's the value behind that? Should anyone in America, should everyone in America have access to a place to sleep, a safe place to sleep? What's the value behind that? That every human being in him or herself in our nation is a full and equal citizen and has full and equal protection. So that's how I would move it. And then we have to figure out how we do that. But we have to ask the question, is there something fundamental about being a human being that every person is treated with dignity? If the answer is no, which I think there are people who believe that every person shouldn't be treated with dignity. We've seen that on a regular basis. If we say yes, things will emanate from it. We say it's in the Constitution. It didn't say we, some of the people, though they thought that maybe, but they didn't write it. For them, at the moment that they wrote that, they were using the word people as they understood it as the broad group. We get to expand it now. That's the right of reading the text. Understand, originalism is not a reality. This notion of reading text as it was written doesn't work. Because if we go back to reading it as it was written, it was a totally different world. We would be living in a different time, in a different place. Everyone who reads a text brings to it his or her values of today. We also bring our own lexicon of today, which is different than the lexicon of words or glossary that they understood. So we need to articulate, and we need not to be afraid of that. We need not to back away from the idea that evolution is a natural and appropriate way for a country to exist, that we cannot stay fixed forever. If that were the case, we would still have slavery. Women wouldn't have the right to vote. That's what the text said. We can push it and we can use it as it would. I'm sorry. How much have we got?
I'm suggesting that there's two more
Cool.
Yeah.
that I saw. Okay, cool.
I think that when we talk about FDR and his success and where we are in the country, the country is in a huge social transition, and the success of the Constitution and the success of the country is a sign that the Enlightenment worked. Our leaders, they were well versed in those principles. We need, I think, a new Enlightenment. We're in the middle, and it's hard to see when you're in the middle of change that's so dramatic. But the value system has been unduly influenced by commercialism. The religions have not given us what we needed to deal with the bombardment of commercialism that we've had to deal with in the last 60, 70 years. This is something new in the history of the world, where we're constantly told that the only thing that matters is our own individual happiness. And the sense of community is really lost in that message. And if the only thing that matters is your individual happiness, you're inclined to think less of others, and you're inclined to do whatever it takes. And the commercialism tells us how to be happy. And the religions have fallen into that trap. They haven't adjusted. And people have lost a sense that religion is going to give them what they need to deal with all of these mixed messages.
Let me just write a couple quick notes. The fastest group of people religiously in America that's growing is the non-religious. So there is a larger group of people who are growing, but it is a disorganized mass. that's one of the issues. Jerry Falwell, when he did the moral majority, was really very, very insightful. He recognized an organized minority is a lot more powerful than a disorganized majority. That was brilliant on his part, and we can learn from that. The other thing too is, there's a book I would recommend. I wouldn't necessarily read the whole book if you don't have time. It's called Thank You for Being Late by Tom Friedman. You can read a lot of essays. It's a great book. You should buy it. But he talks about the rapid change, and there's a lot of disequilibrium right now in America because of the change. Lots of people are very afraid, and we need to deal with people who are afraid, people who feel like they're losing their jobs and that they're losing their future. If you've worked in a particular kind of career and you see that career ending and you thought your children were going to go into it, you don't know what you're going to do. We need to recognize that as a new reality a reality for people. It's a reality that's always been going on. There were buggy makers who were going out of business when the car came along, and they had to either figure out a way to keep on going and educate their children to have a new career. Right now we're going through a transition very much like that, but it's far more rapid than it has ever been. And Tom Friedman does a really good job showing sort of the exponential change that's taking place. So we also have fear that is gripping a lot of people, and for some people, that fear can energize anger, angst. We point to the other as the source of the problem, because it's very hard to identify a changing culture as the problem. I would argue not that we need a new enlightenment. I think we're still debating the enlightenment. I don't think it's over yet. That would be I think it's a longer process to move into modernity. And we as an American society, we're all about a post-enlightenment experience, and we need to remind it. The fact that there are American textbooks that no longer say that millions of years ago dinosaurs walked the face of the earth because people didn't like that is scary to me. That's frightening that we have gone away from a scientific worldview. If we're able to allow that to happen, then the Enlightenment knowledge, which was about empowerment of people, a really good educator's job is to teach their students so well they come back in 10 years and tell you why you were wrong. Teaching is a subversive activity. It is not telling them to come back and repeat what you said. It's coming back and tell you where you missed it. And that was the power of the Enlightenment. It broke authority, and we need to do that. But in order to do it in a healthy way, it needs to be grounded in a sense of commitment to one another, that we're in this together, that every human being has sort of individual dignity, and as a nation, it's we the people together that are creating this, not some of us.
I'm just going to ask Alberta, we started about 10 minutes later. Can we go 10 minutes late?
Sure. How many more questions?
There's at least, well, of the people who have
And I promise
asked
I'll give my
one,
answer shorter from now on.
there's actually 4 of the people who haven't asked one before.
Okay, I'm looking at what Trump has done. You have you talk about the majority that's disorganized, and the minority, the Klans, neo-Nazis. These are the reactive people. And when you introduce fear, it leads to hatred, and it leads to scapegoating, which we've all seen in history before, this country, in Europe, and it's scary. And what we need to do as a majority is maybe reach these people and tell them they have nothing to fear. Go to them, and maybe get more jobs in the country. Trump needs to tax companies that send their countries overseas very hard, so that maybe these people that are disenfranchised can get the jobs they need and not blame everybody else.
One of the most powerful things I think about hate that you raised was after the shooting in Pittsburgh, the Jewish community organized what was called a show up for Shabbat, which was we opened up all the synagogues. My congregation on the Friday night after that shooting was as full as the Jewish New Year. Easily half of the people there were not Jewish. They were people I never met before. I spoke multiple times the week after Pittsburgh, and I said the same thing at every event. We need to get to know each other. That we came and you showed up, or I showed up at an event, but we didn't know each other's name, was part of the problem. We need to recreate community to realize that our differences are much smaller than our similarities, and that we are in this together. That when people are shooting bullets, they don't ask who you voted for. They didn't ask people in that synagogue if you were really Jewish, meaning were you raised Jewish, were you born Jewish, they went into a place that they identified and they killed people. They've gone into churches and people have been shot. There were 2 African Americans that were shot in Kentucky. We need to start seeing that, and we need to come together, not just in tragedies. We need to come together for celebrations, and we need to know each other as friends so that we're working together all the time.
Tommy. Yeah, I would just say amen and yes. And I have...
Mic, Tommy.
Huh?
Okay, closer to the mic.
Okay, yeah. I worked for, I was a volunteer with a ragtag group in Denver that was trying to seek some kind of human rights improvements in Latin America. Well, I stuck with it for 17 years because the mission was to work towards peace with economic justice. And I wanted to have a finger in that, participate in that. And I think people do participate when they really understand what the vision, mission, and values of an organization are. And I've been the facilitator for many nonprofits to do just that with their strategic planning.
That's a conversation we're having about America. What's the vision, mission, and values?
Exactly.
We've lost that.
What you just said is what I think the Democratic Party needs to do, and I don't have a lot of faith that it's going to be initiated nationally. I wish it were. And so maybe we need to start initiating it right here. And we're certainly not going to do it today, but I do propose that we spend some time focusing on this as in thinking through, could this, what we do, be a model for the Democratic Party so that we are able to have the messages and strategies and policies and so on that bring people together around common visions and mission.
Yeah. Last 2. Marlena?
So you said say your name first. So I'm Marlena Brookfield. So the first overarching thing is the public, and the 3 values underneath would be education, participation, and petitioning, holding them accountable. Because we have to have the education so we can discern, all the content that we're having thrown at us, be able to think critically of, okay, is this real? What's fake news? And also have that education to know, okay, when you turn 18, you can register to vote. You should do it. This is how you can keep this system of democracy going, by voting and participating. And the petitioning, clearly why we're all here is because we're trying to hold these people that have been elected accountable, and they are right now trying to take that right away.
Great.
Okay, Elizabeth gets the last one.
I'm Elizabeth, and I guess a value I was thinking of that I don't know if this was specifically addressed was just universal suffrage, and and my big one is separation of church and state, and equity, which is a little different than equality. My question, though, is there anybody from the last election cycle that you see as the embodiment of really doing what you're talking about?
I'm gonna take the 5th. That's a hard question. That's a good question and a hard one. I think one of the things that I recommended to a group that I was talking to was look at your candidates' debates. Whether the candidate won or not, watch them speak when they were in front of the opposition. Did they represent the values that you held and hold? I found that a lot of candidates, when they're in a public forum or a forum like this, are much more direct and powerful, and oftentimes when they're in debate, they become softer, or less specific, or less values-driven, in an effort to do that. I think that that's a way to ask the question. I think certainly Sherrod Brown, when you saw him, he didn't move away from his core principle. I think that becomes an issue. Authenticity, we use the word authenticity a lot. I think the word authenticity is an okay word, but I think the fact is he has a track record. He actually has said what he means what he says, he says what he means, and he does what he says. And we have to give people time to do that. So I think he would be somebody who I would see in fitting that category. Congressional candidates across the country, I couldn't pick one out. I had a chance to talk to a number of them, but I can't give you the name of one that just jumps out at me. I think the challenge is going to be, we being the Democratic Party, looking at who's going to run for president is going to be just a mess, frankly. I think we're looking for a savior. I don't think it works that way. I think no one person changes it in that kind of way. Every person has the power to change the world, but I think oftentimes we're looking for that person in the wrong place. I think we have to begin to have a conversation about how that process is going to take place, but I think we're going to get a lot of people running, and we're going to get a lot of noise for a while. We'll just take a deep breath. Let's get to the new year. Enjoy ourselves a little bit. I think we all earned a bit of a rest. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Rabbi Barr, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. Have a good holiday season.
You've done it again, folks. You've had a perfectly good hour with a wonderful speaker, and he's been really, I feel like I've gone away with a whole new set of questions I have for any candidate who's going to represent me. Thank you. Thank you. You have your list of people who are coming in the future. Next week it's the Young Democrats. Gwen McFarland is going to be here. You have at least 3 meetings to go to tonight.
Or more. Maybe.
Or more. Thank you so much for being here. You've been a great audience and great questions. Thank you for coming.